Unnecessary sequels and reunions can be polarizing. The Barkleys of Broadway is such a film. Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers had ended their partnership 10 years earlier. Both were enjoying some success on their own, Fred most recently with Judy Garland in Easter Parade. And MGM began production on a follow-up film. But then Judy Garlanded right out of that picture, and the studio recruited Ginger to save the project. So if you jumpstart a franchise 10 years after their last movie, what could go wrong? Well, the plot, for starters. Fred and Ginger are married Broadway stars who argue a lot about Ginger's career. The public thinks she would be nothing without Fred, and Fred happens to agree with the public. The only person who takes Ginger seriously is a pretentious young Frenchman who wants this 38-year-old Ginger to star in his play about an 18-year-old Sarah Bernhardt. They have a sidekick in Oscar Levant, who essentially plays the same guy he played in American in Paris. Here, his cynicism is funnier, partly because of the running gag about his impeccable yet unappreciated love life.
Marie, Gloria, Genevieve, this is Henrietta.
Are they suggesting what I think they're suggesting? Yep. He gets two of the movie's best scenes, just playing piano, though honestly these two scenes could have been dropped into any musical. They have absolutely no bearing on the plot. These scenes are the best of the random number out of a show scenes, which make up the most of Barkleys' musical numbers. There's also Shoes with Wings On, which is a special effects masterpiece, up there with Mary Poppins 10 years later. And there's a delightful tap number. But their opening number is obscured entirely by title cards. Imagine the first dance they'd done together in 10 years and you can't even see it. And I really wish my one Highland fling would just go away. There's a plea to old school fans by reprising They Can't Take That Away From Me. But, the film grinds on. The Barkleys bicker and they separate. Ginger apparently starts a relationship with the French playwright. The last quarter of the movie takes this Cyrano de Bergerac turn. Fred, realizing the Frenchman cannot provide Ginger with the coaching and encouragement that she deserves, impersonates Ginger's lover on late-night anonymous phone calls. It's really sweet, but it actually reinforces the theme that Ginger would be nothing without Fred. They could have stretched this out to make a feature-length screwball comedy, something like Gay Divorcee or Top Hat, but this isn't that kind of movie. You know, the fun kind of movie. Then Ginger, on her opening night, wows the crowd with a cringe-worthy spoken word rendition of the Marseillaise.
Hosanna, citoyens! Formez vos bataillons! Marchons! Marchons!
Wow. Maybe because I personally don't enjoy movies about either divorce or showbiz, none of this is much fun for me to watch. But I think the main thing is that Barkleys of Broadway throughout is an MGM musical, which is a world away from the RKO musicals. Here are some admittedly generalized comparisons. Sets. MGM movies tend towards highly detailed, smaller sets that lack a fourth wall, making everything seem like a very, very expensive play that's been filmed, except for the occasional dream sequences, which I actually really like. RKO movies take place in expansive ballrooms and insane hotel rooms, or in giant, flimsily constructed fantasy versions of Brighton, Rio, Venice, Paris, London. Colors. MGM, garish Technicolor. Great in the fantasy scenes. Kinda overwhelming the rest of the time. RKO, black and white, always classy, and sometimes used to great effect. Costumes. MGM films have a cool mid-century verve to them, as if Edith Head had designed everything. She didn't. The RKO costumes are outright fantasies. Who hangs out in top hat and tails? And just look at this quick retrospective of Ginger's costumes. This is a fantasy world. Music. I'll take Gershwin, Berlin, and Kern over Rodgers and Hammerstein and Hart and even especially Sondheim any old day of the week. Scripts. MGM tends to be sincere, emotional, a little corny. Their plots expect you to really care about what happens to these people. RKO tends to be witty, breezy, risque. The brittle plots hang on that wit and style and the fantasy. Now this is a generalization, but just compare these two scenes about the temptations of adultery.
I think Madge is a very brave person.
Yes, I have a tremendous admiration for her.
Well, if Madge doesn't care, I certainly don't.
Neither do I.
Compared with this.
Look at the rain on the fields.
Look, all this is subjective. I am Generation X, so surely I will prefer the amoral, gorgeous fantasies of RKO to the more traditional fairy tale romances of MGM. I grew up with color TV, so those Technicolor fantasies don't strike me the same way they struck my parents, and so on. As Oscar Wilde once said, the highest as well as the lowest form of criticism is a form of autobiography. I'll leave it to you if this is high or low criticism.